So after 5 grueling days of preliminary hearings, we ended up finding out that David would indeed be officially charged. He would be indicted with the murder of Celeste. Is going to be facing a trial for these. But he does have the opportunity to cop a plea. Now, he will be having an arraignment at the end of August, and there is a possibility that he might plead guilty. And there's a few interesting reasons he might do this. Now, the district attorney, Nathan Hochman, recently went on News Nation to kind of talk about the possibility of David taking a plea and basically his opportunity to do so, as well as kind of his thoughts on the preliminary hearing and how much more evidence. They have mountains of evidence in addition to what we saw. So let's hear what the DA has to say about this, and I'll give you guys kind of a little bit of backstory about whether or not I think that he might make a plea, whether or not I think that would be a good move, whether he has anything to lose taking this to trial, and maybe some of the things that you might not have thought about when it comes to the evidence. But let's hear what the DA said.
The week where a Los Angeles judge found there was enough evidence to try the singer, real name David Anthony Burke, for the alleged murder, all before allegedly hiding her body in the trunk of his Tesla. The grisly images of her remains were shown as evidence in court, along with hundreds of text messages and photos between the dead teen and David that gave an inside look at their alleged. But in spite of the mountain of evidence, or perceived mountain of evidence, there were gaps in the case that the defense may exploit at a trial. For example, the prosecution still doesn't have the murder weapon, the alleged murder weapon. So how do prosecutors plan to fill in those gaps? What do they have? I spoke to LA District Attorney Nathan Hochman in an exclusive interview earlier today. Here's a look at our conversation. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's good to see you again. Congratulations. Big win this week. I just want to start off how you're feeling, your office is feeling, and most importantly, I don't know if you've had a chance to speak with Celeste's family in the last couple of days. I know this has been a lot to go through this preliminary hearing. I'm curious how they're doing.
So the family is doing as well as you can expect, having lived through this incredible tragedy of initially believing their daughter was just missing, and then finding out that she'd been murdered and her body had been dismembered and stuck in the front of a Tesla. And as far as what happened this week, again, it's a step towards the ultimate result, which is to get a conviction for first-degree murder for the barbaric and horrific crime that David Anthony Burke, the singer David, has conducted.
So it's interesting, right? This sort of reminds me of when I was at the Lil Durk trial, and, even the judge described the LA murder that Lil Durk is accused of as a despicable murder, despicable, horrendous crime. And, as Nathan Hochman is making it very clear, this was a barbaric and horrific murder. This wasn't, a couple guys having a shootout and mutual combat, on the block over a dispute. This was, a poor, defenseless little girl who was tricked, misled, gaslit, groomed, and ultimately murdered. It's horrific. So I do think that there is a lot more evidence that will be coming out, and I think a lot of that will speak to how barbaric and horrific this crime was, as well as the grooming. And as he is about to explain, that preliminary hearing only showed a part of the evidence, really was the tip of the iceberg for what they actually have on him. And there were things that were in that initial piece of paperwork for his arrest that we still haven't heard of,
And this was a step, the preliminary hearing. Judges held him to answer on the 3 felony counts that we presented. The next step will be an arraignment and then eventually a trial.
You say the step. It's interesting because, look, as I've told my viewers, and you and I both know, the prosecution doesn't have to present all the evidence that they have at a preliminary hearing. And you mentioned this earlier on in the week when you said that what was presented was only a fraction of the evidence. But, look, I followed every second of this. And the defense, they highlighted what they argued were gaps in the prosecution's case, particularly the murder and mutilation charges. So I'll just list out a few things that they mentioned. They said no surveillance footage of Celeste arriving at the home. The Uber driver can't say where he dropped Celeste off. No positive blood on the chainsaws. Celeste inviting herself over there instead of being lured. How do you know David watched her bleed out in the home? No statements from David beforehand that he was going to kill Celeste. Do you have more evidence that hasn't been shared that is going to address all of that at a trial?
In short, yes. And I'm not going to go, obviously, through it right now.
Listen to what he just said. Bear in mind, I've watched these lawyers go at it for 5 days. They're very careful how they talk, even on the defense side. They're very careful not to lie. When David's defense were making the point, well, you know, was Celeste's family aware of who David was? Did members of Celeste's family know about the relationship? They were very, very careful about what they were saying to lead you down a certain path. What was never asked was, did Celeste's parents know about Celeste and David's relationship? They never asked it because the answer would have been not helpful for the defense. So they're very careful on both sides of the lawyers. They're very precise with their language. And I was even thinking, as before he said it, I was thinking, well, he's probably going to be given I can't say. He said yes. He said yes in so many words. He said yes. All them things that you said, oh, you can't prove that. He said, yes, we have more evidence. He's cooked.
In short, yes. And I'm not going to go, obviously, through it.
He said, I ain't got to show you that. I ain't got to show you what we got. But yes. Yeah. Oh, but they don't have this. They got no evidence. There's no. He said, yeah. We got evidence. Don't worry. We got more.
Right now, that evidence will be presented at trial. But you can imagine that a lot of the situations where we are allowed to use hearsay, in other words, the detectives were talking about their investigation, people they spoke to, documents they reviewed, in court, we will actually present the people that they spoke to, and we'll present the chain of custody to get to the documents that they reviewed. So we'll be able to present a lot of the evidence that will rebut, even more sufficiently than we've already done, all the arguments being made by David's counsel. That being said,
So listen to what he did. You got to be very careful, okay? Look, I'm a hawk, all right? Let's get the transcript up and actually analyze word by word what he said. Listen, this isn't just any lawyer. This is the district attorney for the Los Angeles County. This is the tip top. This guy there's not a better lawyer in California, right? Not a better county for you to be the top dog in. He is very, very used to talking like this. He is very careful and precise with his words. I'll show you over here on this side of the screen the transcript. Let's look word by word, deconstruct what this lawyer at the top of his game is saying, and we will understand, all right? He said, in short, yes, I'm not going to go through it right now. He said, yes. And normally these guys don't be saying yes to stuff. They can't say 100% forensics. They have to say possible blood. He said, yes, in short, I don't need to expand on it. Yeah, I'm not going to go through all of it, but you can imagine a lot of the situations where we're allowed to use hearsay. So bear in mind, it kept coming up in the preliminaries. That's hearsay. You can't say that. You can't say it. There's going to be a lot more stuff. And the judge said numerous times, well, when we get to trial, for the sake of this preliminary hearing, I don't need to hear about that. Don't worry about it. But at the trial, you will be allowed to present that. So there was stuff that they wanted to bring up in court that they couldn't because of the context. It was only a preliminary. They only have to prove probable cause. So they're basically saying, look, we're going to have statements from the detective, people they spoke to. We might start hearing about David's friends, David's family. They might start throwing people on the stand that don't want to be up there, and they're going to spill the beans. People talking about, why wasn't Neo at the hearing? Why wasn't Asia called to the stand? Why wasn't David's mum there? They're saving the good stuff for trial, and they have a lot more that they can use. They absolutely mopped the floor with him with what little that they actually had. And again, they said, we will actually present people that they spoke to, all right? They're basically going to say people that the detectives got told a whole bunch of stuff that they couldn't even bring up. They couldn't say secondhand what somebody else had said to them. All right, they couldn't do that the hearsay and give secondhand conversations. But what they'll be able to do is they'll be able to put people on the stand. They'll be able to give more information and then put people on the stand. All right, and present the chain of custody. They're basically going to present all of the different people that were involved, all the different people that knew things. And again, we're hearing that, oh, well, David was gaming before Celeste came over. Who was he gaming with? What did he say when he had to log off? Did he log back on and keep gaming? What did he say to them? He apparently had his phone wiretapped. What conversations did he have after the fact that they probably couldn't present in court in the preliminary hearing? He probably snitched on himself and confessed to people on a tapped phone, people. That is what we're dealing with here. So let's just let him say that again, and then we will proceed with the next part, where he basically just outright rejected the self-harm and self-defense arguments that basically were kind of touted by his defense. He's basically about to say, look, their best defense, their best lines, we're going to absolutely just tear apart.
their investigation, people they spoke to, documents they reviewed. In court, we will actually present the people that they spoke to, and we'll present the chain of custody to get to the documents that they reviewed. So we'll be able to present a lot of the evidence that will rebut, even more sufficiently than we've already done, all the arguments being made by David's counsel. That being said, ultimately what happened is that Celeste Rivas Hernandez shows up at his house on April 23rd, 2025 at night and is never heard from again. An inflatable pool, the contents of which were found, some of the contents of which were found in her bones when the bones were discovered, the dabber bags. We took
people talking about, oh, well, where's the murder weapon? Where's the chainsaw he used? Bro, she was found in his car with pieces of blue plastic that connected like a puzzle piece perfectly to a blue kiddie pool that was found inside his garage, covered in a liquid that glowed up blue when it was sprayed that detects blood, likely blood. We don't... he obviously got rid of the murder weapon. Like, the idea that, like, just because they don't have the knife or the chainsaw is absurd, and it's not going to work.
Trips to Santa Barbara,
yep,
which is probably 100 miles away from his home, the night in which she is last seen. And then eventually her identification is found on the road that the Tesla, we were able to track the Tesla to in Santa Barbara County. So there's a tremendous amount of circumstantial evidence, and as you're aware, circumstantial evidence is as powerful, and the jury will be instructed of this, as direct evidence. That's how we're going to convict David.
100%. Circumstantial evidence, of course, is very powerful. The defense...
So they're going to be able to use this circumstantial evidence that they've not been able to use. And basically, as we already heard, this idea that he was, that he didn't do anything and he stood by while she died. They don't need... People are acting like, oh, well, just because they didn't have a guy in the corner from the DA's office filming him standing by while she bled out. She was delivered to his home in an Uber. His phone pinged cell towers showing that he was at home, and the defense is like, oh, he could have been outside at the perimeter of the house. Bro, this is nonsense. Okay, he was at home, and this is circumstantial evidence. He was at home. She was delivered from an Uber ordered on his account from her house to his house. All right. She never texts anyone ever again after she arrives to his house. His garage is full of blood. He drove the Tesla 100 miles away that night on a route where her ID was later found. Brother, he's cooked. He's absolutely, there's just nothing, this circumstantial evidence is plenty. And the jury are going to look at all this. They're going to look at more evidence than we've already seen. And they're going to see this guy obviously did this based on the evidence.
Defense did something interesting, though, because we were waiting to see what they may say, how they might challenge the evidence, kind of a preview of what a trial would look like. What I took away from it, this idea, do you really know what happened in the house? Is it possible that maybe she did something to herself that night, or that David acted in self-defense, that she physically threatened him in the way they kind of references to these messages that she allegedly sent him? I think there was a question about, can you definitively say what happened in that home? I mean, what was your reaction to them presenting that form of defense?
We anticipate all different types of defenses. When you basically have done the crime, your lawyers are going to come up with all different possibilities of what could have occurred, other than what the evidence will show beyond a reasonable doubt as to what did occur. We know, for instance, that the reason we can sort of time frame the time that she arrives at the house is we'll know that from the Uber driver. We can also time frame the time that he then calls her cell phone and effectively asks her where she is. Well, goes ahead and sends a text message to that in that respect, which is about 20 or 22 minutes later. And we know that she is at the house. She's arrived at the house. She never leaves that house. He then goes again to Santa Barbara that night. Again, it's not something that you necessarily would do if nothing had happened at your house, and you certainly wouldn't order a shovel thereafter, and you wouldn't order different types of chainsaws, you wouldn't order an inflatable pool, and you wouldn't order cadaver bags if, in fact, something happened. And as was pointed out during the preliminary hearing, even if at some point she injured herself or anything like that, at no point does he call 911. Or take any steps whatsoever to deal with the fact that she ended up bleeding out that night in his home. So again, we don't have to prove at trial, the standard of beyond all possible doubt.
Right.
That's not the standard, as you're aware. It's beyond the reasonable doubt. And we think when a jury uses its common sense and reason, and here's the overwhelming timeline that we have put together that points in only one direction, which is to his guilt on first-degree murder, we think a jury will then eventually come to that resolution.
Do you have a...
So it is pretty clear to me that this jury is basically going to be tasked with, finding out, basically, just beyond a reasonable doubt, what they believe actually happened. And this is the thing. It's like they've only got to create a reasonable doubt. I've seen the evidence in the preliminary hearing. Anybody with a brain, a bit of common sense, they said the jury are going to have to use their common sense to determine if they think that David killed her. Bro, common sense? We only need to see the Tesla in his name and the fact that he was the last person who drove it, and it was full of air fresheners. It just on common sense, bro, he's finished. He's cooked. It's actually absurd that he even thinks that he's got a chance. Now, this is the part where we would hear the discussion of the possibility of a plea deal, and the DA would basically say he would only accept a plea deal that matched the evidence and gave pure justice to Celeste's family. I believe that if he basically said, look, I'll take life in prison without the possibility of parole, no death penalty, and no embarrassing trial, the DA would probably accept that. Here's the thing. I said this in a previous video. I think David's loving the attention. He loves being the center of attention. He loves everyone looking at him, talking about him. He was the most Googled man on earth last year. Low key, at the end of the day, I think this has happened now. He did what he did. He probably feels like he did what he had to do. I said in a previous video, as we saw, Danny Masterson of That 70s Show was handed 30 years to life by the same judge for 2 R words back in the day. David's crimes arguably are worse in the terms of at least the victim was younger and more vulnerable. It would have been a statutory R. There would have been dozens of instances of the R. There were 48 illegal videos that depicted illegal acts, which would have been under a statutory basis. So no matter what, even if he'd have let her live and he ended up getting caught and prosecuted, he would already have been facing more than 30 to life. So there really isn't a deal to be made. And in his eyes, he probably, if he actually had a brain, which he might not because of the way he's moved, but if he actually had the foresight to think, I could be getting 30 years to life just for messing with what is a murder on top of that. I know it's horrible to think about that, and I would never want to think about a human being's life like in such terms, in terms of bargaining and just on the numbers algorithmically. But at the end of the day, he probably felt like he did what he did. It was worth a try to try and completely cover his tracks. He got away with it for over a year, all right? It basically was like just around a year from the time of the murder to the time he got arrested. The body was found in September and then he gets arrested in April. But what is insane is that, he just there really just is no way of him taking a plea, because I think he loves the attention, and I think he thinks if there's a 1% chance that he's going to beat it, he might as well take it, because he kind of does have nothing to lose at this point. At the end of the day, the only plea that could possibly be on the table is life without the possibility of parole. But let's hear what the DA says.
Do you have a theory about what happened to that purported missing chainsaw? Because there was a conversation about whether or not that might have been used in anywhere allegedly used, and whether or not it was, discarded at some point. Do you have any theory that you're going to present regarding that chainsaw?
Doesn't matter.
All our theories, and more important, all the evidence that we're going to present will be in that court of law.
Okay.
To a jury of 12 to get that unanimous verdict.
He is talking like he knows. Listen to what he said, all right? They said, you got any theory on what happened to that chainsaw? He said, all them theories are going to be presented in a court of law in front of the jury to get a unanimous verdict. I wouldn't be surprised he might be on the phone snitching on himself on a tapped phone call talking about, bruh, I ditched the chainsaw. I melted the chainsaw in acid. Who knows, all right? But I have a feeling they're going to have a theory. When it comes to the trial, I think they're going to paint an entire narrative start to finish on exactly what happened and the full-blown cover-up. It's going to be impossible for him to beat.
So let me ask you this about a trial. And the reason I bring this up is, look, I was just reading the transcripts. I was reading the reporting about what happened in that courtroom. the photos that were shown of Celeste's body, the allegedly sexually graphic photos that were found or allegedly found on David's phone, it was difficult for me to even read it. As I'm looking at this, I'm wondering, do you want to spare a jury from having to view any of this? Do you want to spare the family from having to view any of this? The reason I'm asking, is there room in any way? Is there a road, a path out there whereby you would work out some sort of plea deal with David to avoid any of this? And look, I have to call it out. The death penalty hasn't been announced yet.
So you are correct that because it's a first-degree murder with special circumstances case here in California, the punishment can either be life in prison without the possibility of parole or the death penalty.
I wonder, I think this case is so high profile, it's so heinous, it's arguably the worst crime a celebrity has ever committed in Los Angeles history, as far as an actual celebrity that's been caught for a crime. You know, O.J. Simpson, absolutely awful, 2 victims, but with this, it was an ongoing abuse and gaslighting of a, and then the attempted cover-up, the horrendous murder, the state that the body was found in. I think you could argue this is the worst thing that anyone's ever done in Hollywood, and I feel like they might make such an example of him. This is such a big deal. He was the most Googled person last year. This is the biggest celebrity true crime case in the world right now. I think they might say, we're going to go full-blown death penalty. We're going to bring it back. We're going to wheel it back for David.
As far as the death penalty goes, we go through a very rigorous process in my office, using the most senior attorneys in the office to evaluate every aggravating and mitigating factor that will be presented. We will be looking forward to getting a presentation by David's lawyers that will inevitably present the mitigating factors. We'll be speaking with the victim's family. Certainly we'll look at the evidence. Whether or not David wants to come forward with some offer, David and his counsel are always free to make an offer. Until and unless an offer is made that we think comports with the evidence and obtains the justice for the Hernandez family, we will be proceeding to go to trial.
So he's basically saying, look, we could make a deal, but unless it gives justice to the family, what's even the point? People saying he needs the death penalty. Something is seriously wrong with David. That poor baby didn't know who she was dealing with. He's finished his career and his life. He deserves nothing less. Terrible. Okay. I can't wait to hear that guilty verdict. That's going to hit. I'm not going to lie. That guilty verdict's going to hit. Hell no. Accountability to the fullest. Justice for Celeste. Alleged murder. She was murdered. There ain't nothing alleged about it. And by this moron David, what an idiot. No pleading. Please. I'm usually not for the DP, but in this case, yes, she had her whole life ahead of her, and her death was slow and painful. I think David's loving the attention. I think the only thing that's going to wipe that smug look off his face is hearing he has been sentenced to death. All right, it's over with. You going to the sky. All right, no writing songs and releasing songs from your cell and catching clout online and reading the newspaper in there. Death, you were going to the sky. You in the ether. All right, we smoking you. Says, this is key for me. Burke has pleaded not guilty. His defense attorneys say there are gaps in the evidence prosecutors have presented in court so far. Hochman and his prosecutors held back a tremendous amount of circumstantial evidence from the preliminary hearing that will help convict him. They've held back a lot of evidence that will help. He is cooked. People are still going to argue circumstantial evidence isn't enough to convict him. They think every convicted murderer has a video of themselves committing the crime. Hopefully his lawyers have more common sense than that. There's practically a video of him committing the crime of concealing the body in his car. There's a video of him driving the body to its final spot in a nearby his street. Here's the thing. All right, Blair Burke, I would be surprised if she even advises him, maybe you should take a plea. She's saying, look, you might as well roll the dice, and you're going to be paying top dollar to do so, all right? You want us to actually run these ridiculous defenses in court day in, day out, embarrassing ourselves, you better pay that invoice, all right? Listen, Blair Burke pulling up in two, 3 Bentleys next time, all right? Whatever next case she trying in this one, she pulling up back-to-back Rolls-Royce convoy, okay? Because she getting the king bag out of this. And I low-key don't respect it, but on the other hand, having seen her do her thing in court as a lawyer, everybody does have the right to a defense. And quite frankly, if she is... Really, the money should go to Celeste's family, but even if she is playing a small role in leaving this clown penniless, is what it is, man. Is what it is, man. Blair Burke, she need that She need that Bentley Bentayga speed with the, you know what I'm saying, with every option. Saying only life without possibility of parole to avoid the death penalty. Anything less would be a travesty. Also giving up rights to appeal. Problem is he can still give interviews and mentally harass the family by doing this when he gets bored in his cell. I think anything 65 years plus would be sufficient enough. Not exactly life without parole. With that, he would still never get out. Life expectancy for someone in prison is lower than someone who isn't. He will know he'll die in prison if it's that old. He's probably lived most of his life already if he gets put in general pop. But 65 years is nowhere near justified for the horrific crimes. It would be cool if they were like, yeah, we're going to give you a plea, 65 years, but you can't have protective custody. You're going to have to go into the jungle. You're going straight to the jungle, all right? With the real lions, all right? And the hyenas in the real gen pop. They're going to tear you limb from limb. They ain't fucking with you, David. The big takeaway here is that the prosecution is not going to be the ones offering a deal. Great move. Check Mr. Burke. And if he comes around looking for a plea, then suddenly, oh, you look kind of guilty now. They know how much evidence they have. They for sure have the upper hand. I'm not going to lie. I think Beth Silverman's ready for action. I think she's ready to just roll her sleeves up and just cook this fool day in, day out. She was killing it. All right. She out here kicking Steve out the room. She beefing with people that are making snarky comments to her in the hallway. She absolutely cooking Blair Burke. They're going back and forth. Like, she cooking people on the stand. I think she's ready. She at the top of her game. I think for him to take a plea would take away, you know what I'm saying? That's like taking putting Michael Jordan on the bench for the championship. She ready. She said, Coach, I'm ready to cook this fool. She's trying to put points on the board, man. Look, I'm not comparing it to sports to belittle the situation, but all I'm trying to say is that these guys are at the top of their game. And honestly, I think the opportunity for Beth Silverman to actually just attack this case in court with all of her skills, all of her experience, is going to be a slam dunk. And it is going to be just... it's a sight to behold, to be honest with you, because there's even more evidence. Like, I already saw her cook him that one time. Like, you telling me there's more? She got more ammunition? She got more moves that we ain't seen before? It says, I would assume the DA would only accept life without possibility of parole, something like that. You have a chance at parole when you're 90 years old at best. I hate when people simply call him David. It's way too common of a name. He's not famous enough to own a name like that. I don't see an issue between either of them. This is not an important thing to talk about. What's the benefit of him agreeing to a deal? He saves money for the trial. He will have to potentially pay Celeste's family when they sue him. Here's the thing. He's going to fight tooth and nail, and they're hiding the assets already. So admitting defeat and taking the plea, that's going to make him even quicker to lose his civil lawsuit. He can't take a plea. Honestly, he can't take a plea. Avoiding the death penalty, there's no executions in his state. He can be on death row forever. Death row can have better conditions than regular prison, special treatment like having a pet or an Xbox, being isolated. This is the ironic thing, is he's going to take it all the way. He's probably going to get the death penalty, and then he's going to end up in a better situation than he would have been if he was on life without the possibility of parole on protective custody. It says the only benefit I see is sparing his family the trial, media circus, and public shame. Don't share and put Colleen on the motherfucking stand. She needs to be asked some questions. The evidence presented in the preliminary hearing was graphic and shocking. Only a fraction of what would be shown in trial. Accepting a plea would spare the family and potential jurors trauma. It was very traumatic, and I honestly, I do feel for the jurors, because obviously I knew what I was getting into, even though I would say I have been traumatized by what I saw in that courtroom. It was horrible. It was the worst thing I've ever seen in my life, and I cannot forget it. I wish I could, but I can't. Those poor jurors, 12 people, and probably some additional ones that have to sit in just in case people drop out, they're never going to be the same. And these are normal day-to-day people that, you know what I mean? They didn't want to be no part of this. I think it's the only acceptable deal, in my opinion, is life without parole. All right, we heard that a million times before. Enough plea deals for horrific crimes. We need trials the way our justice system is intended, especially if there's evidence of others colluding with him in this crime. This is the thing. I think whatever you do not allow him to record music behind bars ever. I wish people realize death penalty in California is the same as life in prison, but with automatic appeals. Now, if we could get him tried in his home state of Texas, game on. What is very interesting, though, is that I wonder if they will actually say, this one's so bad, we're going to kill him. We're going to do death penalty, and we're actually going to kill him. We're going to follow through. We're going to put him down like a dog. Capital punishment is a legal penalty in the state of California, but it hasn't been carried out since 2006 due to a standing federal order issued that year against the practice, 2019 moratorium on executions by Gavin Newsom. Litigation resulting in the court order has been on hold since the promulgation of the moratorium. Should the moratorium end and the freeze conclude, executions could resume under state law. Wow. So they've done 709 Guys, let's just make it 710, and then we can see what the other people have done. That's super interesting. The last execution that took place in California was in 2006, was Clarence Ray Allen. What did this fool do? American gang leader and proxy murderer. A murder committed. So he like Lil Durk and them. He was executed in 2006 at the age of 76 by lethal injection at San Quentin State Prison for the murders of 3 people. He was the second oldest inmate at the time to be executed since 1976. He was ordering armed robberies across California. He ordered the 1974 murder of his son's teenage girlfriend. Oh, so he on the David shit. That's horrible. Wow. For informing others of her involvement in the gang. And then while serving a life sentence for Kitz's murder, he organized the killing of Byron Schlietwitz, part of a greater murder scheme to eliminate witnesses in the murder trial. Low-key, he got them David charges. Murdering a right? And then organizing a killing of a witness. That became known as the Franz Market murders. Him and the victim and 2 uninvolved employees were murdered by a recently released convict who was promised payment by him. So he was found guilty of 3 murders, sentenced to death. It was pushed back 3 times for 2 decades, and they finally smoked him after deciding in 2005. They said he's no danger at this point. He's incapacitated. There's no state purpose, but no, we're smoking him. It's justice. The purpose is justice, folks. They argued that execution would constitute cruel and unusual punishment due to his advanced age and health conditions. No, he's not allowed to go out whenever he feels like it. We smoking him. We putting him down like a dog because he deserves it. It requested he be granted clemency by Arnold Schwarzenegger. Refused, and he got smoked. And he's the most recent person to get smoked in California by lethal injection. It's only right. It's only right. So look, it would be very interesting to see if they could put David as the new one. If David could take this guy's spot, and I'm definitely not trying to wait until David's 76 years old. I think it needs to be. I mean, shit, man. I think they should. I think they should take Clarence Ray Allen's spot and give it to David and have him be the most recent person that's been executed in California. David Burke, the next phase of the trial prep, looking into the legal aspect of this case that we've waited so long to come to fruition. What will the defense decide to do as far as his defense, knowing that there's substantial evidence of his guilt? So this is kind of the next steps, right? The next process. Correct me if I don't get this. Correct me if I'm wrong. David will be headed to some of the same things he's been through, only a bit differently. He's now being charged. He'll be having a trial. The prosecutor is filing a formal charging document. Even though he's pleaded guilty, this is a formal charge, so he will probably have an arraignment, enter a plea officially. He appears before the judge again. He'll hear the charges officially. He'll probably go not guilty. And then basically they'll address if he'll have a bail, which he likely won't. I would not see him having a bail anytime soon. He's clearly a flight risk, and he's just a danger to the community. The fact he has money and all these hidden accounts, the judge might re-examine it. I don't think he's getting no bail. If he's given bail, that is insane. I ain't going to say too much, but if he's given bail and he's released back into the community, that is absolutely, it's not happening. So there'll be pre-trial discovery. They'll then put forward even more information. The lawyers can kind of ask to throw out certain things, block certain evidence, move the trial location. Don't think that's going to happen. They'll basically have to form the jury and make sure that no one's heard of him. That's going to be very, very difficult. But here's the thing. I would say he was the most Googled person of the year last year, but I meet people all the time, especially older people in business. I'm like, oh, I'm covering the David trial. And they're like, no idea about that. No idea who that is. No idea what, not a clue. So even though it's big news, they're saying they could move it to a different jurisdiction if he's too famous in LA, but I think he's famous all around the world. And maybe they'll do a plea deal. They'll schedule and prepare the trial. The judge and the lawyers will pick a date for the start of the main trial, and then they'll set deadlines for the final paperwork. Both legal teams get their expert witnesses in order. Excuse me, I'm running out of breath. Physical proof and arguments will be ready for the courtroom. Hopefully the media will be allowed in the room. It will probably be a raffle. It will probably be even more busy. I don't think they'll have cameras. The judge is not feeling the cameras, and I think that's going to continue. I think she's had that in other cases too. And can we agree that we can just have the detectives describe it again? And is that enough? And I think David's team would definitely accept that, because it's like showing it is going to be so damning and horrific that it's just like, you're cooked, all right? You'd be better off letting them describe it. The only difference is if any of the other evidence is flimsy, perhaps the prosecution will say, no, we want to show it, parts of it, to just basically make it very obvious these illegal things were going on. I hope not, because I really don't want to see that. But we're going to find out. But that would be very, very bad. So people are saying, I'm positive I know what the defense will do. They'll paint David out to be naive and inexperienced due to homeschooling. They'll paint a narrative that he met her on a Roblox server, and because he was so lonely and isolated and socially, emotionally stunted, they'll say she was the first and only girl he'd ever spoken to at that point, and that he was starved for attention and friendship. The poor thing developed this close friendship with Celeste. Try and establish that when David realized how young she was, he tried to do the right thing by ending it, and because he's so innocent and sweet and religious and homeschooled, of course. But she convinced him to stay because she loved him so much, and as his first love, he was helpless. They'll say that within months of moving out on his own, he met Asia and other girls his age and realized how weird the relationship was. They'll say he tried to break things off over and over again, causing her and the family agitation. Then finally, they will claim that she insisted on coming to his house April the 23rd, and with that lingering threat of being exposed at the finish line less than 48 hours before his first album being released, he was too afraid to say no. I believe the theory will either be that Celeste showed up ready to fight, either about Asia, the album release party, or something else. Maybe they'll say he tried to end things that night. Maybe they'll say she saw a text from a girl go through his phone. Ping through his phone. It doesn't matter. They'll use a video of her with the neighbors to show she was feisty and aggressive as a kid who had no problem shouting at men twice her size in the middle of the hood. Then they'll remind you that David, he was homeschooled, no life experience. He would have been scared to yell at a self-proclaimed gangbanger, unlike Celeste. So they'll say she attacked him first, or threatened to attack him first. He grabbed the first thing he could defend himself with, a knife, and stabbed her because he felt his life was in danger. They'll argue that it was self-defense, or at most murder in the second degree, which carries the possibility of parole. Again, to be clear, that's not what I think happened. That's not how I would characterize the situation, but that's one way the defense will go. This is a good comment. I'm not worried because the preliminaries were only a fraction of the evidence, and the physical evidence is overwhelming, but I do think this is going to trial, and I think it's going to be a lot closer than many of us realize. Not because there's any doubt David killed her, but because Celeste and her family are not very sympathetic victims. I mean no disrespect, but the defense will exploit them to the moon and back to paint Celeste as the aggressor. Now I've seen her text, I get it. It's very solid strategy. They can't beat the physical evidence, but they can try and assassinate Celeste's character, and Blair Burke is basically a professional victim blamer, but Silverman is undefeated in murder trials. This is like the World Cup of criminal law. Bro, she is she's the sniper. She's a sniper for a reason. They are not on trial. They could have handed Celeste to David on a silver platter, and it would not make him any less guilty. What an amazing comment. Good emulation of a typical defense. This is probably very close to what they're going to do. I don't feel like I need to read another comment because that was just so on point. What an incredible comment. What an amazing commenter. Master Blaster. All right. What else Master Blaster got going on? They got a lot of karma. They be out here cooking, doing their thing. It's 18. All right, it's an 18 plus count. So let's not dig too deep into that. But anyway, okay. So David Burke. Did I already look at this? This is a slightly different. Is this the same one? I think this might actually be the same one. What kind of... Looking into the next... Oh, my bad. I've got the wrong link. I believe this is a different link. Hello. I believe this is a different link. Go on. Yeah, it's okay. It says, what kind of plea deal can they even offer? If the evidence is overwhelming and seemingly life no parole is what eventually and most likely is what the DA is going to ask for, then what would a plea deal be? As I understand, if they offer anything less than that, the public uproar will be huge. But if life no parole is all they're going to offer, then he's got nothing to lose and he has to take it to trial. Can anyone think of any other viable plea deal that David and his attorneys would be willing to accept? So if the prosecution is confident they can get a conviction, they don't have any reason to offer a plea deal. Well, the DA did say David can make an offer of a plea deal whenever he wants. He didn't say we're planning to offer a plea deal, and these guys are very, very careful with their words. This also has a high-profile case. They don't have an incentive to just move things along because they've got bigger and more important cases to tend to. I mean, realistically, I'm not saying that all the people involved haven't got incredible careers before. Beth Silverman's prosecuted some big dogs out here before, okay? I believe she prosecuted the worst, most prolific serial killer in America with the most bodies. I'm pretty sure she actually prosecuted him. So, but this is the biggest case currently in the world right now, I would say, as far as true crime goes in America. So I would feel like she's ready to go for trial and ready to cook this guy in front of everybody. I think for David to even rob to be honest, if David was actually smart, for him to actually rob the prosecution of the opportunity to air him out in court like this would actually be a smart move. But he's not smart, and I think he's so self-centered that he can't think beyond himself. And he's just selfishly going to just take this all the way and get absolutely demolished in front of the world, which is great. Based on what we know far, prosecution might not be 100% sure they'll convict. Juries are more reluctant to convict when death penalty is on the table. In California, the jury decides after a guilty verdict whether they should get death. So maybe the possibility of death in this case won't make them reluctant to find guilty because they decide if he gets death, but not sure prosecution feels assured of a guilty verdict. So the prosecution decides if they want to pursue the death penalty. I've had a suspicion for a while they might just go for life without parole and take the DP off the table. I mean, this is the thing. I think that's smart. And as we've seen, that they don't really want to like push the death penalty anyway. So apparently he can actually request to serve his sentence in Texas close to his family. I have a feeling Texas jails probably even worse than LA jails, but I don't know. Probably less squabbling and more slashing in them Texas jails. So I've heard, I don't know if it's true, that if you get the death penalty, you're more isolated and lonely than life without parole. That might be an incentive to plead to life without parole. I don't think he's going to plea. I hope he doesn't get death. It's an easy way out, but a life sentence, a lifetime of fear, and being used as a toy. Being used as a toy is crazy. We can only hope. No plea deal. He didn't offer Celeste Rivas Hernandez no plea, no deal, nothing. They could take the death penalty off the table in exchange for life in prison and a fully detailed confession. They could also take the DP off the table and give him a 50 to life with no possibility of parole for 50 years, again with a fully detailed confession. But I think they want to take it all the way. I think they're ready. They're saying, what if he pleads insanity? I'm sure that they would want to go that route. For sure, his team would have a professional agree with him. But it all seems so premeditated, and I thought premeditated is 9 out of 10 times life without parole. But the special circumstances, isn't that the reason why the DA mentioned something about the death penalty? I mean, I think they have all the evidence, everything we know, plus whatever else they have not disclosed. The only way I see them arguing is that way. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm very, very intrigued to hear what other evidence that the DA's office has on him. I think it's going to be overwhelming when it comes to being able to use hearsay and circumstantial evidence, things that other people said, tapped phone conversations, things that the friends said. What were they smelling when they were around the property? What were they hearing from David? What was the excuse? What did David tell Rob? What did he tell everybody that he was when he was on tour and everybody's phones pinged off and it said Singer David, dead body found in Singer David's car? What the fuck did he tell everyone? That's what I want to know, and I think that's going to be very telling. We're going to hear that in the trial, I think. So I'll keep you guys posted. Hope you found that as a useful update. I wanted to kind of catch up with everything the DA had to say. I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you for watching this one. I'm out for now. Peace.